Miss Whitmore, you have exactly 72 hours to pay the full amount, or we will seize all assets belonging to St. Celestine Orphanage. Celeste stared at the foreclosure notice in her trembling hands, the numbers blurring through her tears. $2 million. Her mother Victoria had somehow accumulated a debt so massive it could swallow the only home 63 children had ever known. There must be some mistake, she whispered to the banker sitting across from her at the Whispering Pines Community Bank. My mother died when I was 3. How could she owe this much money? Mr. Henderson adjusted his glasses and slid another document across the polished table. Medical bills from private treatment facilities, experimental therapies, specialized care. The debt was transferred to you as her sole heir upon your 22nd birthday last month. The lenders have been patient, but they want their money now. Celeste's world tilted. She worked as the town librarian, earning barely enough to keep herself fed and clothed. The orphanage survived on donations and state funding that barely covered basic needs. Where could she possibly find $2 million? What if I can't pay? Henderson's expression softened slightly. Then the property will be auctioned. The children will be redistributed to facilities throughout Oregon and Washington. Some might find foster homes, but at their ages. He didn't need to finish. Most of the kids at St. Celestine were teenagers, considered too old for adoption. Celeste stood abruptly, her chair scraping against the floor. I need time to think. She stumbled out of the bank into the crisp October air, her mind racing. There had to be a solution. There always was. Sister Margaret had taught her that during her own dark days at the orphanage, when nightmares about her mother's death kept her awake for weeks. Back at the library, Celeste sat at her desk surrounded by towering stacks of returned books, but she couldn't focus on cataloging. Instead, she found herself searching online for any mention of Victoria Whitmore's deaths, any clue about what had happened. That's when she found the forum post. Seeking young woman, aged 18 to 25, for unconventional arrangement. Discretion required. Compensation guaranteed to exceed any existing financial obligations. Serious inquiries only. The contact information led to a law firm in Seattle. Caldwell, Morrison and Associates. When she called, a crisp female voice answered immediately. Miss Whitmore, we've been expecting your call. Celeste's blood chilled. How do you know my name? Mr. Stonehaven has been monitoring your situation. He's prepared to make you an offer that will resolve your current difficulties. Can you be in Seattle tomorrow afternoon? I don't understand. Who is Mr. Stonehaven? How does he know about my debt? All will be explained during your meeting. The address is 1247 Pike Street, penthouse level. 2 o'clock sharp. The line went dead. Celeste stared at her phone, her heart hammering. This felt wrong, dangerous even. But what choice did she have? In 60 hours, St. Celestine would be gone forever, and 63 children would be scattered across the state system like leaves in the wind. She called in sick the next day and drove her aging Honda Civic the 3 hours to Seattle. The building on Pike Street was a gleaming tower of steel and glass that made her feel small and insignificant. The penthouse elevator required a special key card that the security guard provided after checking her ID. The doors opened directly into an opulent office that screamed wealth and power. Floor-to-ceiling windows offered a panoramic view of Puget Sound, while expensive artwork lined the walls. But Celeste barely noticed any of it because her attention was immediately captured by the man standing behind the massive mahogany desk. Phoenix Stonehaven was nothing like she'd expected. Tall and lean with dark hair and piercing gray eyes, he looked to be in his early 30s. His expensive suit was perfectly tailored, but there was something haunted in his expression that made her think of wounded animals. Miss Whitmore, please sit. His voice was low and controlled, but she caught an undertone of exhaustion. Dark circles shadowed his eyes, and his face had the gaunt quality of someone who'd forgotten how to sleep. Before we begin, he said, settling into his chair, I need you to understand that what I'm about to propose will sound insane. But I assure you, the offer is legitimate and legally binding. Celeste gripped the arms of her chair. I'm listening. I will pay your mother's debt in full, plus an additional $500,000 for the orphanage's endowment fund. In exchange, you will enter into a contract of personal service for 1 year. Personal service? Phoenix's gray eyes never left her face. You will live in my house. You will be available to me at all times. You will follow my instructions without question or hesitation. Think of it as being my personal assistant, companion, and—" He paused. "Property." Celeste shot to her feet. "You're talking about buying me. I'm talking about a mutually beneficial arrangement. You need money. I need someone who won't ask questions or try to fix me." His laugh was bitter. "Believe me, Miss Whitmore, I've tried everything else. This is insane. It's probably illegal. It's a standard personal service contract with non-disclosure agreements. My lawyers have ensured everything is above board. You'll have your own quarters, complete privacy when not needed, and full medical coverage. The only thing I require is your complete obedience and discretion." Celeste's mind reeled. "Why me? You could hire anyone." Phoenix stood and walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. "Because you're desperate enough to say yes, and you have something I need, which is the ability to be invisible. You've spent your life in a small town, caring for children nobody wants. You know how to fade into the background, how to anticipate needs without being asked. Most importantly, you won't try to save me." Something in his tone made her chest tighten. "Save you from what?" He turned back to her, and for just a moment, she saw past the cold mask to the broken man underneath. "From myself." Celeste closed her eyes, thinking of the children sleeping in their dormitories back in Whispering Pines. Tommy, who still had nightmares about his abusive father. Sarah, who was aging out of the system next year with nowhere to go. Marcus, who dreamed of becoming a doctor but would probably end up working construction like every other kid from their background. "1 year," she said quietly. "1 year. And then I'm free? Free as a bird." She opened her eyes and looked at him. "What aren't you telling me?" Phoenix smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "Miss Whitmore, if I told you everything, you'd run screaming from this building and never look back. Sometimes ignorance truly is bliss." Despite every instinct screaming at her to leave, Celeste heard herself say, "Where do I sign?" The contract was thicker than a novel. Celeste sat in the leather chair across from Phoenix's desk, her eyes scanning pages of legal terminology that might as well have been written in ancient Greek. Her hands shook as she turned each page, the weight of what she was about to do settling over her like a heavy blanket. "Clause 14 states that you cannot leave the property without my explicit permission," Phoenix said from behind his desk, his voice clinical. "Clause 21 prohibits contact with anyone from your previous life unless approved in advance." Celeste looked up. "You're making me a prisoner." "I'm ensuring discretion. My life isn't exactly normal, Miss Whitmore. There are aspects of my business and personal affairs that require absolute confidentiality." She flipped to the next page. "What does this mean?" "Personal grooming and appearance standards will be determined by the employer." Phoenix's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "I have certain expectations about how you present yourself. Nothing unreasonable. Appropriate clothing will be provided." "Clothing for what exactly?" "Social functions. Business dinners. Sometimes I require a companion for public appearances." Celeste set the contract down. "You want me to pretend to be your girlfriend. I want you to be whatever I need you to be in any given moment. Sometimes that might mean standing quietly in a corner. Other times it might mean making small talk with investors' wives. The role varies depending on the situation." She studied his face, looking for some hint of what lay beneath the controlled exterior. "Have you done this before? Bought someone?" "You're not being bought. You're entering into a service agreement." "That's not what I asked." Phoenix was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes fixed on something beyond the window. "No, you're the first." "Then why now? What changed?" He turned back to her, and she saw a flicker of something raw across his features before the mask slipped back into place. "My sister died 6 months ago. Since then, I've discovered that solitude isn't as appealing as I once thought." Celeste felt a stab of unexpected sympathy. "I'm sorry for your loss." "Don't." His voice was sharp enough to cut. "I don't want your pity, Miss Whitmore. I want your compliance." She picked up the contract again, flipping through more pages. The compensation section made her dizzy. $2.5 million, deposited into an account in her name within 24 hours of signing. It was more money than she'd ever imagined having. "There's something I need to know," she said without looking up. "Which is, are you going to hurt me?" The question hung in the air between them like a physical thing. When she finally raised her eyes, Phoenix was staring at her with an expression she couldn't read. "Physically? No. I have no interest in violence." "What about other ways?" Phoenix stood and walked around the desk until he was standing directly in front of her. Up close, she could see the exhaustion etched into every line of his face. The way his expensive suit hung slightly loose on his frame, as if he'd lost weight recently. I'm going to be honest with you, Miss Whitmore, because after today, honesty between us will be a luxury neither of us can afford. I am not a good man. I've built my fortune by destroying other people's dreams and stepping over their broken bodies to reach my goals. I don't sleep well at night, I drink too much, and I have a temper that has cost me every meaningful relationship I've ever had. He crouched down until they were eye level, his gray eyes boring into hers. If you sign that contract, you will see me at my worst. You'll watch me fall apart and put myself back together more times than you can count. You'll be required to stand by and do nothing while I make decisions that would horrify any decent person. And through it all, you'll smile and nod and pretend that everything is perfectly normal. Celeste's throat felt dry. Why are you telling me this? Because once you sign, there's no going back. The contract includes penalties for early termination that would bankrupt you and leave those children homeless anyway. This is your last chance to walk away. She looked down at the pen in her hands, then at the signature line on the final page. Somewhere back in Whispering Pines, 63 children were probably doing their homework, fighting over television channels, or sneaking extra cookies from the kitchen. They had no idea their entire world was balanced on the edge of her decision. What happened to your sister? Phoenix's face went completely still. That's not your concern. You said I'd have to pretend everything is normal. If Aurora's death is affecting you this much, it seems like something I should understand. Aurora. He repeated the name like it was a prayer. How do you know her name? Celeste realized her mistake immediately. She'd never told him she knew about Aurora, and he'd only mentioned having a sister. I looked you up online before coming here. The obituary mentioned her. Phoenix studied her face for what felt like an eternity. Aurora was 22 when she died. Same age as you. She was sick for months before the end, and I couldn't save her. What kind of sick? The kind that doctors can't explain and money can't fix. There was something in his tone that made Celeste think he wasn't telling her everything, but she didn't push. Instead, she picked up the pen and signed her name at the bottom of the contract before she could change her mind. Phoenix took the papers from her immediately, as if afraid she might try to tear them up. Miranda Silvercrest will pick you up tomorrow morning at 9. Pack light. Everything you need will be provided. Miranda? My housekeeper. She'll explain the daily routines and house rules. Celeste stood, her legs unsteady. What do I call you? Mr. Stonehaven in public. Phoenix when we're alone, unless I specify otherwise. And what do you call me? For the first time since she'd entered the office, Phoenix's expression softened slightly. I suppose that depends on how well you follow instructions. As she waited for the elevator, Celeste caught her reflection in the polished metal doors. She looked pale and younger than her 22 years, like a child playing dress-up in her good interview clothes. Tomorrow she would wake up in a different world, bound to a man who'd just admitted he wasn't good, serving a purpose she didn't fully understand. The elevator dinged and the doors opened. As she stepped inside, she heard Phoenix's voice from behind her. Miss Whitmore. She turned back to face him. He was standing in the doorway of his office, one hand gripping the frame as if he needed the support. Welcome to hell. The elevator doors closed before she could respond, leaving her alone with her reflection and the growing certainty that she'd just made either the best or worst decision of her life. The Stonehaven mansion, perched on a cliff overlooking Puget, sounded like a monument to wealth and isolation. Miranda Silvercrest, a woman in her 50s with steel-gray hair and sharp blue eyes, had picked up Celeste that morning in a black Mercedes that cost more than most people made in 5 years. Mr. Stonehaven has very specific preferences, Miranda explained as they pulled through wrought iron gates that closed automatically behind them. He values punctuality, discretion, and silence. The house has 23 rooms, but you'll only need to concern yourself with a few. Celeste pressed her face to the window, watching manicured gardens and marble fountains pass by. How long have you worked for him? Since he was 16. I worked for his parents before the accident. What accident? Miranda's knuckles whitened on the steering wheel. That's not my story to tell. The mansion's front entrance was all soaring columns and gleaming windows that reflected the morning sun like mirrors. Inside, Celeste felt dwarfed by cathedral ceilings and a grand staircase that curved upward like something from a movie set. "Your quarters are on the second floor, East Wing," Miranda said, leading her up the stairs. "Mr. Stonehaven's private rooms are in the West Wing. You don't go there unless specifically summoned." They walked down a hallway lined with oil paintings of stern-faced ancestors and landscapes that probably cost more than Celeste's annual salary. Miranda stopped at a heavy wooden door and pushed it open. The suite was larger than Celeste's entire apartment back in Whispering Pines. A sitting area with plush furniture faced floor-to-ceiling windows that offered a breathtaking view of the Sound. The bedroom beyond contained a four-poster bed that could easily sleep four people. "The closet has been stocked according to your measurements," Miranda said. "Mr. Stonehaven's stylist took care of everything." Celeste opened the walk-in closet and gasped. Dozens of dresses, blouses, and skirts hung in perfect rows, their tags still attached. Shoes filled built-in shelves like a high-end boutique display. "How did he know my size?" "Mr. Stonehaven is very thorough in his research." A chill ran down Celeste's spine. "What kind of research?" Miranda's expression remained neutral, the kind that ensures no surprises. "Lunch is served at noon in the small dining room. Mr. Stonehaven will see you at 2 o'clock in his study." Left alone, Celeste explored her new prison. The bathroom was marble and gold, with a bathtub large enough to swim in. The sitting room had a fully stocked bar and a bookshelf filled with classics and contemporary novels. Everything was beautiful, expensive, and completely impersonal. She was examining the titles on the bookshelf when she noticed the photograph tucked between 2 volumes of poetry. It was a candid shot of a young woman with dark hair and bright eyes, laughing at something outside the frame. The girl looked so much like Celeste that for a moment she thought it was somehow a picture of herself. "That's Aurora." Celeste spun around to find Miranda standing in the doorway, her expression unreadable. "She looks like me." "Yes." Mr. Stonehaven noticed the resemblance immediately. Miranda stepped into the room and took the photograph from Celeste's hands. Aurora was everything good in this house. When she died, the light went out of Mr. Stonehaven. "What happened to her?" Miranda was quiet for a long moment, her fingers tracing the edge of the photograph. "She got sick. Started having episodes where she'd lose consciousness, severe headaches, confusion. The doctors ran every test imaginable, but couldn't find anything wrong. Then one morning she simply didn't wake up." "That's terrible." What made it worse was the circumstances. Aurora had been getting better. "Your mother Victoria was her private nurse for the last 6 months of her illness, and under Victoria's care, Aurora seemed to be improving. She was laughing again, making plans for the future." Celeste's breath caught. "My mother worked here?" Victoria Whitmore was the best private nurse money could hire. She specialized in neurological conditions and had worked miracles with other patients. Aurora adored her. "Then why did she leave?" Miranda's face darkened. "She didn't leave voluntarily. Mr. Caspian dismissed her 3 months before Aurora died. Said she was becoming too emotionally involved, crossing professional boundaries." "Mr. Caspian?" "Phoenix's uncle. He handles the business side of the Stonehaven empire." Miranda replaced the photograph on the shelf. After Victoria left, Aurora's condition deteriorated rapidly. Phoenix has never forgiven himself for not fighting his uncle's decision. Celeste sank into one of the armchairs, her mind reeling. Her mother had worked in this house, had cared for the girl whose death was destroying Phoenix. It couldn't be a coincidence that she was here now. "Miranda, what really happened to my mother?" The older woman's face went carefully blank. "I wouldn't know. After she left here, we lost touch." But Celeste caught the slight tremor in Miranda's voice, the way her eyes shifted away from direct contact. She was lying, or at least not telling the whole truth. "I'd like to see Aurora's room." "That's not possible. Mr. Stonehaven keeps it locked." "Then show me where my mother worked, where she took care of Aurora." Miranda hesitated, then nodded. "Follow me." They walked to the other end of the hallway, where Miranda opened a door to reveal what had clearly been a medical suite. Hospital-grade equipment sat covered in dust sheets, and medicine cabinets lined one wall. But it was the personal touches that caught Celeste's attention. Children's drawings taped to the walls, a collection of stuffed animals on a windowsill, and books scattered across a reading table. "Aurora spent most of her time here during the worst of her illness," Miranda explained. Victoria tried to make it feel less clinical. Celeste picked up one of the books, a well-worn copy of Jane Eyre. Inside the front cover, someone had written, "For my brave Aurora, who knows that even the darkest night ends with dawn. With love, Victoria." Her mother's handwriting. Celeste would recognize it anywhere from the few birthday cards and notes Victoria had left behind. She cared about Aurora. Very much. Perhaps too much, according to some people. "You mean Caspian?" Miranda's silence was answer enough. That afternoon, Celeste made her way to Phoenix's study as instructed. She found him standing behind a massive desk covered in financial reports and legal documents. He looked up when she entered, and she saw him take in her appearance. She'd chosen a simple navy dress from the closet, something that felt professional but not overly formal. The clothes fit well. "Thank you. Miranda showed me around the house." "Good. We need to establish some ground rules." Phoenix set down his papers and fixed her with that piercing gray stare. "First, you don't wander the house alone. If I'm not available and you need something, ask Miranda. Second, my private office and bedroom are off limits unless you're specifically invited. Third, we maintain the fiction that you're here as my personal assistant. No one needs to know the true nature of our arrangement." "What about meals?" "We'll dine together when I'm home. I travel frequently for business, sometimes for weeks at a time. During those periods, you're confined to the house, but otherwise free to do as you please." Celeste took a deep breath. "I saw a picture of Aurora today." Phoenix went completely still. "Where?" "In my room. Miranda said I look like her." "You do." His voice was barely above a whisper. "The resemblance is striking. Is that why you chose me? Because I remind you of your sister?" Phoenix walked to the window, his hands clasped behind his back. For a long moment, the only sound was the distant crash of waves against the cliff below. "Aurora believed in the goodness of people," he said finally. "She saw the best in everyone, no matter how badly they'd failed or how dark their hearts had become. When she looked at me, she didn't see a ruthless businessman or a man who'd sold his soul for profit. She saw her big brother who used to read her bedtime stories and chase away her nightmares." He turned back to face her, and Celeste was shocked to see moisture in his eyes. "When she died, that version of myself died with her. But sometimes, when I look at you, I remember what it felt like to be worthy of someone's love." The raw honesty in his voice made Celeste's chest tighten. Without thinking, she stepped closer to him. "Phoenix, what if Aurora's death wasn't natural? What if someone hurt her?" His expression shifted instantly, the vulnerability replaced by something cold and dangerous. "What makes you say that?" "Miranda told me about my mother being dismissed. About how Aurora got worse after Victoria left. What if someone wanted Victoria gone because she was getting too close to the truth?" Phoenix stared at her for a long moment, and she could practically see his mind racing. Then, without warning, he crossed the room and gripped her shoulders, his fingers digging into her flesh. "Never say that again. Do you understand me? Never even think it. You're hurting me." He released her immediately, stepping back as if she'd burned him. "I'm sorry. I didn't mean to. You just can't say things like that." "Why not? If it's true." "Because if it's true, then everyone I've ever loved is in danger, including you." The words hung between them like a loaded gun. Celeste rubbed her shoulders where his fingers had gripped her, and she saw Phoenix's face crumple with regret. "I should go," she said quietly. "Celeste, wait." She paused at the door, not turning around. "Are you afraid of me?" She thought about the question for a moment, considering the man who'd just admitted he might be putting her in danger simply by being near him. "I should be," she said. "But no, I'm not afraid of you." When she finally looked back, Phoenix was standing in the middle of his study looking more lost than any billionaire had a right to be. 3 weeks into her stay at the Stonehaven mansion, Celeste had fallen into a routine that felt both comfortable and surreal. She breakfasted alone while Phoenix conducted early morning conference calls from his office. Afternoons were spent reading in the library or walking the extensive gardens under Miranda's watchful eye. Evenings meant formal dinners where Phoenix spoke little but watched her with an intensity that made her skin prickle. He was a study in contradictions. One moment, he'd be the cold, calculating businessman she'd met in Seattle, barking orders into his phone about acquisitions and hostile takeovers. The next, she'd catch him staring out windows with a lost expression that made her want to offer comfort she wasn't sure he'd accept. Tonight was different. Phoenix had been drinking steadily through dinner, his usual controlled demeanor cracking around the edges. When Miranda cleared the dessert plates, he waved her away with an impatient gesture. "Leave us." Miranda hesitated. "Sir, perhaps." I said leave us. Once they were alone, Phoenix refilled his wine glass and fixed Celeste with a look she couldn't decipher. "Tell me about your mother. What do you want to know?" "Everything. What she was like. What she told you about her work." Celeste set down her own glass, untouched. "I was 3 when she died. I don't remember much. But you must have some memories. Some stories from the nuns at the orphanage." "The nuns said she was kind, that she worked with sick people and tried to help them get better." Celeste paused. "They also said she died in a car accident on her way to see me." Phoenix's jaw tightened. "A car accident?" "Yes." "Why?" Instead of answering, Phoenix stood abruptly, his chair scraping against the hardwood floor. "Come with me." He led her through corridors she'd never seen before, past family portraits whose eyes seemed to follow their movements in the flickering candlelight. At the end of a narrow hallway, Phoenix stopped before a heavy oak door and produced a key from his pocket. "This room is off-limits to everyone, including Miranda." The door opened to reveal what looked like a private investigator's office. Cork boards covered the walls, filled with photographs, newspaper clippings, and documents connected by red string. A large desk dominated the center of the room, its surface covered with file folders and legal pads filled with Phoenix's handwriting. Celeste stepped inside, her eyes immediately drawn to a section of the wall dedicated to Aurora. Photos showed a vibrant young woman at various stages of her illness, the light in her eyes gradually dimming as the timeline progressed. But it was the section next to Aurora's that made Celeste's blood run cold. Her mother's face stared back at her from a dozen different angles. Driver's license photos, employment records, even what looked like surveillance photos taken without Victoria's knowledge. "You've been investigating my mother." Phoenix moved to stand beside her, his presence both comforting and intimidating. "For 6 months. Ever since Aurora died." "Why?" "Because the official story doesn't add up." Phoenix pulled a file from the desk and handed it to her. "Your mother wasn't just Aurora's nurse. She was specifically recommended by someone inside the Stonehaven organization. Someone who knew Aurora's medical history better than the doctors did." Celeste opened the file with trembling hands. Inside were copies of employment contracts, medical reports, and correspondence between Victoria and various doctors. One letter caught her attention immediately. "Dr. Nathaniel Grimwald," she read aloud. "I've never heard of him. Neither had I until I started digging. Grimwald doesn't exist. The medical license is fake, the references are fabricated, and the address leads to an empty office building. I don't understand." Phoenix moved to another section of the wall and pointed to a timeline he'd constructed. Victoria was hired 3 months after Aurora's symptoms first appeared. She was specifically requested by Dr. Grimwald, who claimed to be overseeing Aurora's care remotely. But here's the interesting part. He tapped a series of medical reports. Under Victoria's care, Aurora's condition stabilized. Her episodes became less frequent, her cognitive function improved, and she started planning for the future again. Then Victoria was dismissed, and Aurora died within a month. Celeste studied the timeline, her nursing training allowing her to understand the medical terminology. "These symptoms, they're consistent with slow poisoning." "That's what I think too. But that would mean that someone was slowly killing my sister, and your mother figured it out." The implications hit Celeste like a physical blow. She sank into the chair beside Phoenix's desk, her legs suddenly unable to support her weight. If Victoria discovered someone was poisoning Aurora, why didn't she go to the police? Phoenix's laugh was bitter. Because the person doing the poisoning had the power to destroy her career and her life with a single phone call. Victoria tried to save Aurora quietly, but when that failed, she was eliminated as a threat. "You think her car accident wasn't an accident?" Phoenix pulled out another file, this one labeled Victoria Whitmore, Death Investigation. "The crash happened on a deserted stretch of highway at 2 in the morning. Victoria was supposedly driving to visit you at the orphanage, but the nuns have no record of scheduling a visit." Celeste's hands shook as she opened the file. Crime scene photos showed a car wrapped around a tree, its front end completely destroyed. But it was the toxicology report that made her gasp. She had sedatives in her system. Enough to impair her driving, but not enough to kill her outright. Whoever did this wanted it to look like an accident. Who would do something like this? who had access to both Aurora and my mother. Phoenix was quiet for a long moment, his gray eyes fixed on a photograph of Aurora laughing in a hospital bed. Someone with medical knowledge. Someone who knew Aurora's routines and had access to her food and medication. Someone who stood to gain from her death. Family. Aurora was worth $50 million in trust funds and life insurance. When she died, that money was split between myself and my uncle Caspian. Celeste felt the pieces clicking into place. Caspian dismissed my mother 3 months before Aurora died. He claimed Victoria was becoming too emotionally attached to her patient, that she was overstepping professional boundaries. But you didn't agree? Phoenix's face hardened. I was traveling constantly for business. Caspian convinced me that Victoria was the problem, that she was filling Aurora's head with false hope about recovery. I trusted his judgment. And now you think he killed Aurora for her inheritance? I think he's capable of it. Caspian has always resented the fact that our father left the bulk of the estate to Aurora and me. He spent years trying to find ways to increase his share of the family fortune. Celeste stood and walked to the wall of evidence, studying the photographs and documents with new eyes. If this is true, why hasn't he tried to kill you too? Because I'm useful to him alive. I run the business operations that generate his income. But Aurora was just a financial drain in his eyes. Expensive medical care, experimental treatments, and no chance of her ever contributing to the family business. The coldness in Phoenix's voice chilled Celeste to the bone. How can you talk about your sister like that? Because that's how Caspian sees people. As assets or liabilities. Nothing more. Celeste turned back to face him, and she saw something in his expression that made her step closer. Phoenix, there's something you're not telling me. He met her eyes, and for a moment she saw straight through to his soul. If I'm right about Caspian, then bringing you here puts you in the same danger that killed your mother and Aurora. Then why did you do it? Because I'm selfish. His voice was barely above a whisper. Because for the first time in 6 months, I have a reason to get out of bed in the morning. The admission hung between them like a live wire. Celeste found herself moving closer to him, drawn by something she couldn't name. Phoenix, I know this is insane. I know I'm probably going to get you killed just like everyone else I've ever cared about. Stop. But I can't let you go. Not yet. She was close enough now to see the gold flecks in his gray eyes, close enough to smell his cologne mixed with whiskey and desperation. Then don't. The words left her lips before she could stop them. Phoenix stared at her as if she'd just offered to walk into hell with him. Celeste, you don't understand what you're saying. I understand that Aurora deserves justice. I understand that my mother died trying to save your sister. And I understand that you're not the monster you pretend to be. Phoenix's control finally snapped. He reached for her, his hands tangling in her hair as he pulled her against him. The kiss was desperate and hungry, filled with months of grief and loneliness and need. Celeste melted into him, her hands fisting in his shirt as she kissed him back with equal fervor. When they finally broke apart, both were breathing hard. Phoenix rested his forehead against hers, his eyes closed. This complicates everything. I know. If Caspian finds out about us, then we'll deal with it together. Phoenix opened his eyes and looked at her with something that might have been hope. You're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish. Maybe both. He kissed her again, softer this time, and Celeste felt something shift between them. The dynamic of employer and employee, of captor and captive, dissolved into something more dangerous and infinitely more precious. We have to be careful, Phoenix murmured against her lips. Caspian can't know how much you mean to me. How much do I mean to you? Phoenix pulled back to look at her, his expression serious. Enough that I'd burn down everything I've built to keep you safe. Outside, storm clouds gathered over Puget Sound, and somewhere in the darkness, Celeste was certain that danger was already closing in. The sound of a car crunching up the gravel driveway at dawn jolted Celeste from sleep. She'd spent the night in Phoenix's arms in his private study, both of them too exhausted from revelations and passion to make it to proper bedrooms. Now she scrambled to straighten her dress, while Phoenix moved to the window. Shit. His voice was tight with tension. Caspian's back early. Celeste felt ice form in her stomach. He wasn't supposed to return for another week. Plans change. Phoenix was already moving, gathering the scattered files from his desk and shoving them into a wall safe hidden behind a painting. You need to get back to your room immediately. Use the servant's staircase. Phoenix, what if he suspects something? He paused in his frantic cleanup to cup her face in his hands. Then we stick to the story. You're my personal assistant, nothing more. Can you do that? Celeste nodded, though her heart was hammering against her ribs. The transformation from lover back to employee felt like putting on a costume that no longer fit properly. She made it to her room just as she heard the front door slam shut. Through her window, she could see a black Bentley parked in the circular drive, its engine still ticking as it cooled. Whoever had driven Caspian home had left in a hurry. Celeste quickly showered and changed into fresh clothes, trying to wash away any trace of the night before. But when she looked in the mirror, her lips were still swollen from Phoenix's kisses, and there was something different in her eyes. Something that screamed guilt to anyone who cared to look closely. Miranda knocked on her door precisely at 8 o'clock. Mr. Caspian would like to meet you in the morning room. Did he say why? Miranda's expression was carefully neutral, but Celeste caught the warning in her eyes. He's curious about Mr. Stonehaven's new assistant. The morning room was a sun-drenched space overlooking the gardens, decorated in shades of cream and gold that should have felt welcoming. Instead, it felt like a beautiful trap as Celeste entered to find Caspian Stonehaven seated at a small table, newspaper in hand. He was older than Phoenix by perhaps 15 years, with silver threading through dark hair and the kind of patrician features that belonged on old money. His suit was perfectly tailored, his posture impeccable, and his smile as he looked up at her was absolutely chilling. Miss Whitmore, at last we meet. Something in his tone made her skin crawl. Mr. Stonehaven, welcome home. Please sit. I've taken the liberty of ordering breakfast for both of us. Celeste perched on the edge of the chair across from him, every instinct screaming at her to run. Caspian folded his newspaper with precise movements and set it aside. Tell me, how are you finding your position here? Very well, thank you. Phoenix, Mr. Stonehaven is an excellent employer. I'm sure he is. Caspian's smile never wavered, but something predatory flickered in his dark eyes. It's remarkable, really, the resemblance. I'm sorry. To Aurora, of course. Surely you've noticed? The photographs are all over the house. Heat crept up Celeste's neck. Miranda mentioned it. More than mentioned, I'd say. You could be Aurora's twin sister. Caspian leaned back in his chair, studying her like a specimen under a microscope. Tell me about your mother, Miss Whitmore. The question hit like a physical blow. Celeste fought to keep her expression neutral. My mother, Victoria Whitmore. Such a dedicated nurse. We were all devastated when she had to leave Aurora's care. I don't understand. How do you know about my mother? Caspian's laugh was soft and dangerous. My dear girl, did you really think Phoenix hired you randomly? Your mother worked in this very house. She cared for Aurora during her final months. Celeste's mind raced. Phoenix had made it seem like he'd discovered the connection during his investigation, not that he'd known all along. I wasn't aware of that when I accepted the position. Weren't you? How fascinating. Caspian picked up his coffee cup, his movements deliberate and controlled. Your mother was quite special, you know. She had an unusual ability to connect with difficult patients. Difficult? Aurora could be. Challenging. Her illness made her paranoid at times. She developed these elaborate theories about people trying to hurt her. Caspian's eyes never left Celeste's face. Delusions, the doctors called them. Something cold settled in Celeste's chest. What kind of delusions? Oh, the usual things. Poisoning mostly. She became convinced that someone was putting things in her food or medication. Poor child would refuse to eat for days at a time. Celeste kept her voice steady through sheer force of will. That must have been difficult for everyone. Heartbreaking, really. Especially for Phoenix. He blamed himself, you know. Thought he should have been able to protect her. The casual cruelty in Caspian's tone made Celeste want to scream. And my mother helped with Aurora's paranoia? Victoria had a gift for earning trust. Aurora came to depend on her completely. Perhaps too completely. What do you mean? Caspian set down his coffee cup with a soft clink. Your mother encouraged Aurora's delusions. Instead of helping her accept reality, Victoria fed into her fantasies about being in danger. It became clear that she was causing more harm than good. So you fired her. I made the difficult decision to terminate her employment. Yes. For Aurora's own well-being. Celeste felt sick. Every word out of Caspian's mouth was reasonable, measured, and complete bullshit. But she couldn't challenge him without revealing how much she knew. That must have been hard for Aurora. She was upset initially, but she adjusted. Children are resilient. Caspian leaned forward slightly. It's tragic that Victoria died so soon after leaving our employ. Such a waste of talent. The way he said it made Celeste's blood freeze. There was satisfaction in his voice, barely concealed beneath a veneer of false sympathy. The car accident was very sudden. Yes, I understand she was driving to visit you at the orphanage when it happened. Celeste nodded, not trusting her voice. Strange time for a visit. 2 in the morning seems rather inconsiderate to the nuns, don't you think? The question hung in the air like a loaded gun. Celeste realized that Caspian was testing her, seeing how much she knew about the circumstances of her mother's death. I was very young. I don't remember the details. Of course not. You were just a child. Caspian's smile was razor-sharp. It's remarkable how life comes full circle, isn't it? Here you are, working in the same house where your mother spent her final months. Fate has a sense of irony. Before Celeste could respond, Phoenix appeared in the doorway. His face was a mask of controlled politeness, but she could see the tension in his shoulders. Uncle, I didn't expect you back so early. Caspian rose smoothly from his chair. The European meetings concluded ahead of schedule. I thought I'd return home and get acquainted with your new assistant. I see you've met Celeste. Indeed. Charming girl. We were just discussing her mother's time here. Phoenix's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. Ancient history. Perhaps, though I find the past has a way of repeating itself. Caspian moved toward the door, pausing beside Celeste's chair. Miss Whitmore, I do hope you'll be more careful than your mother was. Careful of what? Why? Crossing professional boundaries, of course. It can be so dangerous when employees become too emotionally invested in their work. The threat was unmistakable. Celeste felt Phoenix's eyes on her, willing her to stay calm. I'll keep that in mind. Excellent. Caspian clasped Phoenix on the shoulder as he passed. We should discuss the Morrison acquisition when you have time. There are some irregularities in the contracts that require your attention. After Caspian left, the morning room felt contaminated by his presence. Phoenix moved to close the door, then turned to face Celeste. Are you all right? He knows. Celeste's voice was barely above a whisper. About my mother, about Aurora, about us. He knows everything. He suspects. That's different. Phoenix, he practically admitted to killing my mother. The way he talked about her car accident. Phoenix crossed to her in 2 quick strides and pulled her into his arms. I know. I heard most of it from the hallway. What do we do now? We be very, very careful. And we find proof of what he did before he decides you're too dangerous to keep alive. Celeste pulled back to look at him. There's something else. Something I didn't tell you last night. What? Miranda said my mother was getting too emotionally involved with Aurora. But Caspian just said the same thing. What if they weren't talking about professional boundaries? Phoenix frowned. What do you mean? What if my mother discovered something specific about Aurora's poisoning? Something that made her dangerous to Caspian? Like what? Celeste's mind raced as pieces of the puzzle clicked into place. What if Aurora wasn't just being poisoned randomly? What if my mother figured out the specific poison being used and developed an antidote? Phoenix went very still. An antidote that could have saved Aurora's life and proved that someone was deliberately trying to kill her. No wonder Caspian had to eliminate my mother. But if Victoria developed an antidote, where is it now? Celeste thought about the few possessions her mother had left behind at the orphanage, the small box of papers and personal items that Celeste had never bothered to examine closely. I think I know where to look. Before Phoenix could respond, the sound of footsteps in the hallway made them spring apart. Miranda appeared in the doorway, her face pale with concern. Mr. Phoenix, you need to come quickly. There's been an incident. What kind of incident? Someone broke into your study last night. The safe was opened, and several files are missing. Phoenix and Celeste exchanged a look of pure terror. The evidence they'd compiled about Aurora's murder was gone, and they both knew exactly who had taken it. The game had officially begun. The study looked like a tornado had torn through it. Papers scattered across the floor, desk drawers yanked open, and the hidden safe gaping like an empty mouth behind the displaced painting. Phoenix stood in the center of the destruction, his face carved from stone. He took everything. Celeste whispered, kneeling to gather scattered photographs of Aurora. All our evidence about the poisoning, the timeline, the fake doctor. Not everything. Phoenix moved to his desk, and pulled out a drawer that appeared empty to casual observation. His fingers found a hidden panel, revealing a small compartment. I kept the most damaging evidence separate. He withdrew a single sheet of paper and handed it to Celeste. It was a laboratory report, dated just 2 weeks before Victoria's death. Blood analysis, she read aloud. Patient, Aurora Stonehaven. Traces of digitoxin detected at toxic levels. She looked up at Phoenix. This proves Aurora was being poisoned. Keep reading. Celeste's eyes moved down the page. Secondary analysis requested by V. Whitmore, R.N. Antidote compound synthesized and tested. Treatment protocol attached. Her breath caught. Phoenix, my mother didn't just discover the poisoning. She created a cure. A cure that would have saved Aurora's life and exposed Caspian as a murderer. No wonder he had Victoria killed. The sound of approaching footsteps made them both freeze. Phoenix quickly took the lab report and slipped it inside his jacket just as Caspian appeared in the doorway. My word, what happened here? Caspian's expression was the picture of innocent concern, but Celeste could see satisfaction gleaming in his dark eyes. Someone broke in during the night, Phoenix said evenly. Whoever it was knew exactly where to look. How terrible. Was anything valuable taken? Some business documents. Nothing that can't be replaced. Caspian stepped into the room, his gaze sweeping over the destruction with barely concealed pleasure. I do hope you'll be more careful about security in the future. One can never be too cautious about protecting sensitive information. The underlying threat was crystal clear. Phoenix's jaw tightened, but he kept his voice level. I'll be sure to upgrade the security system immediately. Excellent idea. Caspian's attention shifted to Celeste, and she felt pinned like a butterfly under his stare. Miss Whitmore, you look pale. I hope this incident hasn't upset you too much. I'm fine, thank you. Good. Because I have wonderful news. I've arranged for you to accompany Phoenix to the Morrison Charity Gala tomorrow evening. It will be an excellent opportunity for you to meet some of Seattle's most prominent citizens. Celeste felt Phoenix tense beside her. A public event would put her directly in Caspian's crosshairs, surrounded by witnesses who could be manipulated or silenced. That's very thoughtful, Phoenix said carefully. But Celeste might not be comfortable at such a formal event. Nonsense. I'm sure she'll be perfectly charming. Caspian's smile was razor-sharp. Besides, it's important for business associates to see that the Stonehaven family is united and thriving, especially after all the unfortunate rumors following Aurora's death. What rumors? Celeste asked before she could stop herself. Caspian's eyes glittered with malicious amusement. Oh, the usual gossip that follows any unexpected death in a wealthy family. Suggestions of impropriety, questions about inheritances, whispers about family tensions. You know how people talk. Phoenix's hands clenched into fists at his sides. Those rumors were baseless. Of course they were. But perception is everything in our world, nephew. Which is why it's so important that we present a united front. Caspian moved closer to Celeste, his presence suffocating. I do hope you understand the significance of tomorrow evening, Miss Whitmore. Your behavior will reflect on the entire Stonehaven family. I understand. Wonderful. I've taken the liberty of selecting an appropriate gown for you. Miranda will help you prepare. Caspian headed for the door, then paused. Oh, and Phoenix? I've scheduled a meeting with the Morrison executives for Monday morning. We'll need to finalize the acquisition terms. After Caspian left, the silence in the destroyed study felt oppressive. Phoenix began pacing like a caged animal. This is a trap, Celeste said quietly. He's planning something at the gala. I know, but if we don't go, it will only confirm his suspicions about us. So what do we do? Phoenix stopped pacing and turned to face her. We find that antidote your mother developed, and we expose Caspian for what he is. But first, we need to get you away from here. I'm not leaving you. Celeste, you don't understand the kind of danger you're in. Caspian has killed before, and he won't hesitate to kill again. Then we face him together. Phoenix crossed to her and gripped her shoulders. If something happens to you because of me, I'll never forgive myself. And if I run away and something happens to you, I'll never forgive myself either. Celeste reached up to touch his face. We're in this together, remember? Before Phoenix could respond, Miranda burst into the room, her usual composure completely shattered. Mr. Phoenix, you need to see this. Now. She led them to the kitchen, where the morning newspaper was spread across the granite counter. The headline made Celeste's blood run cold. Mysterious death rocks Seattle medical community. Phoenix grabbed the paper and read aloud. Dr. Evelyn Chambers, the toxicologist who analyzed blood samples in the Aurora Stonehaven case, was found dead in her laboratory yesterday evening. Police suspect suicide, though no note was found. Dr. Chambers was the one who ran the tests on Aurora's blood, Miranda said, her voice shaking. She's the one who confirmed the digitoxin poisoning. Celeste felt the walls closing in around them. Caspian is eliminating witnesses. There's more, Miranda continued. I received a call this morning from St. Celestine Orphanage. Someone claiming to be from your mother's estate contacted them, asking questions about her personal belongings. Phoenix's face went deadly pale. What kind of questions? They wanted to know if Victoria left behind any medical notes or research materials. The caller seemed particularly interested in any experimental formulas or antidote recipes. The antidote, Celeste whispered. Caspian knows my mother developed it, and he's trying to find it before we do. Phoenix was already moving toward the door. We're going to Whispering Pines. Right now. Phoenix, if Caspian is having us watched, then we'll have to be very careful not to be followed. An hour later, they were racing down Interstate 5 in Phoenix's Aston Martin, the Seattle skyline shrinking in the rearview mirror. Celeste clutched the lab report in her hands, studying every detail. The antidote compound, she said, trying to make sense of her mother's notations. It's based on digitalis antibody fragments. My mother was trying to counteract the digitoxin poisoning with a specific binding agent. Would something like that be stable enough to store long-term? If properly preserved, yes. But it would need to be kept at specific temperatures and protected from light exposure. They reached Whispering Pines in record time. St. Celestine Orphanage sat on a hill overlooking the town, its red brick buildings and sprawling grounds exactly as Celeste remembered. Sister Margaret met them at the front door, her weathered face creased with worry. Celeste, dear, I'm so glad you're here. That phone call this morning was very strange. The man claimed to be a lawyer, but something about him felt wrong. Did he give you a name? Dr. Nathaniel Grimwald said he was handling your mother's estate. Phoenix and Celeste exchanged a look of alarm. The fake doctor from Aurora's medical records was making his move. Sister Margaret, we need to see my mother's belongings immediately. The elderly nun led them to a storage room in the basement, where a few dozen cardboard boxes held the possessions of deceased parents and former residents. Victoria's box was pitifully small for someone who had saved lives for a living. Celeste knelt beside the box and carefully removed each item. Personal photographs, a few pieces of jewelry, nursing certificates, and at the bottom, a small leather journal wrapped in plastic. This is it, she breathed, unwrapping the journal with trembling hands. The pages were filled with Victoria's careful handwriting, documenting Aurora's symptoms, tracking the progression of the poisoning, and finally, the breakthrough that led to the antidote formula. She knew, Celeste said, her voice thick with emotion. My mother knew exactly what was happening to Aurora, and she fought to save her. Phoenix read over her shoulder, his face grim. The last entry is dated the day before she was fired. Celeste turned to the final page and read aloud. A. Stonehaven shows marked improvement with antidote treatment. Full recovery expected within 2 weeks if treatment continues. Must speak with P. Stonehaven immediately about C. Stonehaven's involvement. Time is running out. She was going to tell you the truth about Caspian, Celeste said softly, and he killed her before she could. A sound from upstairs made them all freeze. Footsteps, moving through the orphanage with purpose and stealth. Sister Margaret, Phoenix whispered urgently. Is anyone else supposed to be here today? The nun's face went white. No, the children are all at school, and the other sisters are in town. Phoenix was already moving, pulling Celeste toward a second exit. We need to leave. Now. But as they reached the back door, a figure stepped out of the shadows. Tall, expensively dressed, and pointing a gun directly at Celeste's heart. Dr. Nathaniel Grimwald, I presume, Phoenix said coldly. The man smiled, and Celeste recognized him immediately from photographs in Phoenix's study. It was Caspian, but somehow different. Younger looking, with subtle changes to his appearance that would fool casual observers. Hello, nephew. Miss Whitmore. I believe you have something that belongs to me. Celeste clutched the journal against her chest. This belongs to my mother. Your mother stole proprietary medical research from the Stonehaven organization. I'm simply reclaiming stolen property. The research that proves you murdered Aurora. Caspian's facade of civility finally cracked. Aurora was a burden on this family. Weak, sickly, and completely useless. Her death was a mercy. Phoenix took a step forward, his face murderous. You poisoned your own niece for money. I eliminated a liability. Just as I eliminated the meddling nurse who threatened to expose necessary business decisions. You killed my mother, Celeste whispered. I killed a woman who couldn't mind her own business. Just like I'm going to kill you. Caspian raised the gun, and Celeste saw her death in his cold eyes. But before he could pull the trigger, Phoenix lunged forward, tackling his uncle to the ground. The gun went off, the shot echoing through the orphanage like thunder. Celeste screamed and dove for cover as the two men fought for control of the weapon. When the struggle ended, one of them wasn't moving, and Celeste wasn't sure which one was still alive. Phoenix's eyes fluttered open, blood trickling from a gash on his forehead. Caspian stood over him, gun steady in his hand, his expensive suit torn from the struggle. Touching display of heroics, nephew, but ultimately pointless. Celeste knelt beside Phoenix, her hands shaking as she checked for other injuries. The bullet had gone wide during their fight, embedding itself in the orphanage wall instead of flesh. You're making a mistake, Phoenix said, struggling to sit up. People know where we are. No, they don't. Caspian's smile was cold as winter. I made sure of that. Your little adventure to retrieve Mommy's diary was quite predictable. Sister Margaret pressed herself against the wall, clutching her rosary. Please, there are children who live here. Innocent children. The children are at school, sister. They won't be harmed as long as you do exactly as I say. Caspian pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Bring the van around back. We're moving to the secondary location. Secondary location? Celeste's blood chilled. Did you really think I'd commit murder in a place of worship? I have some standards. Caspian gestured with the gun. We're taking a little trip to where your mother drew her last breath. 20 minutes later, they were bound and gagged in the back of a windowless van, speeding toward an unknown destination. Phoenix had managed to mouth "stay calm" to Celeste before Caspian's hired thugs separated them, but staying calm felt impossible when every mile took them closer to death. The van finally stopped after what felt like hours. When the doors opened, Celeste saw they were at an abandoned industrial complex, its skeletal buildings silhouetted against the storm-darkened sky. Welcome to Shadowbrook Manufacturing, Caspian announced as his men dragged them from the van. Once a thriving textile operation, now the perfect place for tying up loose ends. They were hauled into a cavernous warehouse, its broken windows letting in the sound of thunder rumbling overhead. Rusted machinery loomed in the shadows like mechanical ghosts. This is where your mother died, Miss Whitmore, Caspian said conversationally as they were forced into metal chairs. Oh, not the car accident. That was just window dressing. Victoria Whitmore died right here, in this very room, after I explained exactly what would happen to you if she didn't disappear quietly. Celeste's vision blurred with tears of rage. Through the gag, she tried to scream her hatred at him. She was remarkably stubborn, your mother. Even when I showed her photographs of you at the orphanage, detailed your daily routines, explained how easy it would be for accidents to happen to little girls, she still refused to destroy her research. Phoenix strained against his bonds, the chair creaking under his efforts. So I made her a deal. I would sedate her and stage a car accident. Quick, painless, and you would live. All she had to do was tell me where she'd hidden the antidote formula. Caspian began pacing, clearly enjoying his captive audience. Imagine my surprise when she claimed she'd already destroyed it. Even under pharmaceutical interrogation, she maintained that lie. So stubborn, just like her daughter. A brilliant flash of lightning illuminated the warehouse, followed immediately by a crack of thunder that shook the building. The storm was directly overhead now. Of course, I suspected she was lying. The formula was too valuable to destroy, but I never imagined she'd hidden it in a journal at that pathetic orphanage. Caspian stopped pacing and pulled Victoria's journal from his jacket. 25 years of research, condensed into 50 pages of brilliant medical innovation. This formula alone is worth hundreds of millions to the right pharmaceutical company. He tore out several pages and held them up. The antidote that could have saved Aurora. The evidence that would have destroyed me. All of it gone. Lightning flashed again as Caspian fed the pages into a small camp stove one of his men had set up. The paper curled and blackened. 25 years of Victoria's life work disappearing in seconds. But you know what the real tragedy is? Caspian continued, warming his hands over the flames. Aurora was never meant to die. The digitoxin was supposed to make her sick enough to require a conservatorship, giving me control of her inheritance while keeping her alive. Phoenix made a sound of pure fury through his gag. Your mother's antidote was actually working too well. Aurora was getting stronger, more alert. She was starting to ask uncomfortable questions about her medical care. I had to increase the dosage to maintain control. Caspian's face darkened with genuine regret. I miscalculated. The higher dose was too much for her system. Aurora's death was an unfortunate accident. The casual way he discussed murdering his own niece made Celeste sick. One of Caspian's men approached and whispered something in his ear. Caspian nodded and checked his watch. It seems we have company coming. Phoenix, you really should have mentioned that you activated the GPS tracker in your car before we left Seattle. Hope flared in Celeste's chest. Someone was coming to help them. No matter. This ends tonight, one way or another. Caspian pulled out his phone again. Bring in the explosive charges. If the police want to find them, they can dig through the rubble. As his men began setting up what looked like enough dynamite to level the building, Celeste caught Phoenix's eye. He was working frantically at the ropes binding his wrists, and she could see he'd managed to loosen them slightly. The sound of sirens in the distance made Caspian's men nervous. They worked faster, placing charges around the warehouse's support pillars. You have 5 minutes, Caspian told them. Then we leave, with or without Phoenix's cooperation in signing over his assets. But Phoenix wasn't listening to demands about money. His attention was focused on something else entirely. Following his gaze, Celeste saw what had caught his attention. A small radio unit one of the men had left near their chairs, its red transmission light blinking steadily. Phoenix had activated more than just a GPS tracker. Somehow, he'd managed to establish a communication link. Now all they had to do was survive long enough for help to arrive. The warehouse erupted in chaos as Phoenix finally freed his hands and lunged for the nearest explosive device. Sirens wailed outside as police cars surrounded the building, their flashing lights strobing through the broken windows. FBI. Building is surrounded. Caspian's men scattered like roaches in sudden light. 2 headed for a back exit while the 3rd tried to grab the detonator from the table. Phoenix tackled him before he could reach it, and they crashed into a pile of rusted machinery. Celeste worked desperately at her own bonds, finally managing to free one hand just as Caspian appeared beside her chair, his face twisted with rage. If I can't have the formula, I'll settle for watching you burn. He grabbed her by the hair and dragged her toward the center of the warehouse, where most of the explosives were concentrated. But Celeste had learned more than nursing during her years at St. Celestine. Sister Margaret had insisted all the older children take self-defense classes. She drove her elbow into Caspian's ribs with all her strength. He doubled over, gasping, and she rolled away just as the warehouse doors burst open. FBI, drop your weapons. Federal agents poured into the building, their tactical lights cutting through the darkness. Phoenix fought his way free from the thug and immediately started yanking explosive charges away from support beams. The detonator, he shouted to the agents. Someone has the detonator. Caspian was crawling toward a small device that had fallen near the camp stove. Celeste saw him reach for it and knew she had one chance to stop him. She threw herself forward, landing on his back just as his fingers closed around the detonator. They struggled for control of the device as agents closed in around them. Let it go, Caspian snarled, his aristocratic mask finally completely stripped away. You don't understand what you're destroying. I understand perfectly, Celeste gasped, her fingers prying at his grip. I'm destroying a murderer. The detonator went flying, skittering across the concrete floor toward one of the FBI agents, who quickly secured it. Caspian collapsed beneath Celeste, all the fight going out of him as handcuffs clicked around his wrists. Caspian Stonehaven, you're under arrest for the murders of Aurora Stonehaven and Victoria Whitmore. Phoenix reached Celeste's side just as the agents were hauling Caspian to his feet. She fell into his arms, both of them shaking with relief and exhaustion. It's over, Phoenix whispered into her hair. It's finally over. But Caspian wasn't finished. As the agents led him past them, he turned back with one final venomous smile. You think you've won? You've destroyed everything the Stonehaven name represents. Aurora died for nothing, and your precious mother's sacrifice was meaningless. You're wrong, Celeste said, standing up straighter in Phoenix's arms. They died because someone they trusted betrayed them. But their deaths brought us together, and together we brought you down. Caspian's face contorted with fury, but the agents were already dragging him away into the storm. 6 months later, the wedding ceremony at St. Celestine Orphanage was small and perfect. Celeste wore her mother's simple gold cross instead of expensive jewelry, and Phoenix had traded his usual designer suit for something less intimidating. The children from the orphanage served as an enthusiastic wedding party, their laughter echoing off the chapel walls. Sister Margaret performed the ceremony, her eyes bright with tears of joy. Do you, Phoenix, take Celeste to be your wife, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer? I do. Phoenix's voice was steady, but Celeste could see the emotion in his gray eyes. For as long as we both shall live. And do you, Celeste, take Phoenix to be your husband, to love and cherish, in sickness and in health, for richer or poorer? Celeste thought of her mother, of Aurora, of all the pain that had brought them to this moment. I do, forever and always. The kiss that sealed their union was soft and sweet, full of promise and hope. Around them, 63 children cheered and threw flower petals that Miranda had spent all morning preparing. During the reception in the orphanage's newly renovated dining hall, Phoenix stood to make a toast. 6 months ago, I thought my life was over. I'd lost my sister, lost my faith in family, lost my reason for living. Then this incredible woman walked into my office and changed everything. He looked down at Celeste, his voice thick with emotion. She taught me that love isn't just about holding on to what you have. Sometimes it's about fighting for what's right, even when it costs you everything. To the Aurora and Victoria Stonehaven Foundation, Celeste added, raising her glass. May their memory help other families stay together and safe. The foundation had been Phoenix's idea, funded by the assets recovered from Caspian's criminal enterprise. It provided medical research grants and support for families dealing with mysterious illnesses, ensuring that what happened to Aurora would never happen to another child. Later that evening, as they danced alone in the orphanage garden under a canopy of stars, Celeste felt a flutter of movement in her abdomen. Phoenix, she whispered, placing his hand over her still flat stomach. I have something to tell you. He went very still, understanding immediately. Are you sure? The doctor confirmed it yesterday. Twins. She smiled through happy tears. A boy and a girl. Phoenix lifted her off her feet and spun her around, both of them laughing with pure joy. When he set her down, his forehead rested against hers. Aurora and Victoria? I was thinking Aurora and Victoria, Celeste agreed. They would name their children after the women whose deaths had brought them together, whose love had saved them both. It felt like completing a circle, turning tragedy into triumph. I love you, Mrs. Stonehaven. I love you too, Mr. Stonehaven. As they swayed together under the starlight, Celeste felt her mother and Aurora watching over them, finally at peace. The orphanage around them buzzed with life and laughter, 63 children safe and secure in their beds. From the ashes of betrayal and murder, love had been reborn, and it would last forever.